Yeah, and then somebody share We were the three words.
Jane McNamara is going to introduce Daniel Bridges. So let us pray. Come, Holy Spirit, renew the whole creation. Send the wind and flame of your transforming life to lift up the church in this day. Give wisdom and faith that we may know the great hope to which we are called. Come, Holy Spirit, renew the whole creation. Amen. Amen. So Jane will introduce Daniel.
Some of you know that I have been teaching in Phoenix for a while, and I was in Dallas, Texas before that. And as an ESL teacher, English as a second language teacher, I have had the opportunity to work with many young people who are here from all over the world, of course, but particularly in Texas and Arizona, students from Spanish-speaking countries. And along the way, I've had the incredible experience of getting to know some students who are here without documents. They all have documents. Daniel has documents. He tells a good story about that. But they're not here with the document that we require in Arizona for someone to have in order to vote, in order to get a driver's license, in order to go to school and pay in-state tuition. They don't have that document. Even though they grew up here and they've been part of our community and they speak English and they graduated from high school, yet some of these wonderful students have figured out that the only way to move forward on some of these issues is to come out. And some of them have, and more are. And actually, I think that what they have done in Arizona and across the country, is that they have moved the president on this issue, as he has moved on other issues that we care about. And I'm not sure, Daniel, if you were one of the very first Dream Act students I've met or not, but I've known Daniel for a long time. There was a young woman at North High School who got picked up for not having her lights on when she pulled out of a Circle K, and this was in 2007. And this was before I really understood what was going on in Arizona, and really before any of us did. And she ended up in a county holding cell and signed deportation papers in order to get out of jail, and was taken immediately by bus down to the border and with a black plastic bag, and walked across the border, and of course hasn't been able to come back. This particular young woman she had graduated from North High with 24 college credits. You know, sometimes high school students start working on their college credits. And she had been accepted at ASU and had 3 private scholarships to help her with her tuition. And of course back then they were paying in-state tuition, so it was more affordable. So she was starting school in 2 weeks and wanted to become a nurse when this happened. So I guess it was after that that I was stunned. I don't know how to describe how I felt when I realized that this had happened to this young woman who I knew and cared about. And she wasn't able to see her family, her mother, her father, her sister, her brother. And she hadn't lived in Mexico when she was 8. She'd been part of the Phoenix community for 10 years and had her life ahead of her. And heaven knows we need nurses, right? So this made no sense to me. So I found a group called the Cadena Group, and Daniel was part of that group. And they were looking for a place to meet, and they started meeting at our church about once a month. So this has kind of been my journey with some of these wonderful dreamers. And over the years, I have really appreciated Daniel's ability to put words together. He is amazing, just an amazing writer. And graduated from Trevor Brown and went to ASU, double major, correct? Political science and English. English literature, that's why he's a good writer. And political science. And he decided he wanted to go to law school. So he was accepted at ASU and attended law school. And if some of you remember, year was that? 2008. Some of you remember that at Christmas time, we collected donations and helped Daniel pay for his law books that first year. So this church has been involved with Daniel for a long time. And unfortunately, the legislation passed in Arizona that required our kids who were not legal residents of Arizona to pay out-of-state tuition, which meant that his law school tuition tripled. So he decided to work on politics like I work on politics, and you've been doing that for three years. 3 years. And unfortunately, the DREAM Act didn't pass in Congress like we thought it would when President Obama became president. And unfortunately, Daniel will lose his first year of law school credits if he doesn't go back this coming year. So again, our church has stepped up, and we have a scholarship fund here, and we all have lots of favorite charities and lots of places to put our money. But there is a way to write a check to First Congregational Church and help send Daniel back to law school. Year 2, year 3, he's finished. So if any of you are interested, be sure and talk to me about it or talk to Daniel about it. Or if you know someone who might be in a position to help him, I think maybe he'll update you a little bit on where he is with his scholarship fund. I think we've got the first semester covered. First semester is covered. Yay! And if you don't know what out-of-state tuition costs,
Expensive.
should I tell them?
Yeah.
$42,000.
Oh my goodness.
Out-of-state tuition, 42. Trevor Brown graduate, double major from ASU, and they wanted to pay $42,000 to go to law school. So anyway, take it away. All right. Thank you so much. Oh, and one more thing. I'm so sorry. I have to tell you one more thing. Daniel is telling us about some very important issues today that we all need to be aware of. My part of this program is most of us probably vote. If we don't vote and we can vote, we should vote. So I've got forms here, registration forms and forms for mail-in ballots. Some of us have the responsibility for voting for people who can't. And so Daniel's talking about issues, I'm talking about the responsibility we have to vote. Don't take your vote lightly. The recent election in Tempe was won by 139 votes. And the election turned from election day to 2 days later when those last mail-in ballots were counted. So every vote counts. All right, thank you. Daniel's wonderful.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. If you can't hear me, which I don't think it's going to be a problem, but if you can't hear me, just go ahead and raise your hand and let me know. If I'm speaking too fast, I have some women helping me over here, but I don't mind helping them if I am speaking too fast. Again, my name is Daniel Rodriguez, and I am an American without papers. And I'm here to tell you about that story, as well as the work that I do with other Americans without papers that we called DREAM Act students. To tell you a little bit about myself, I'm 26 years old, and I came to this country when I was 7 years old. At 7 years old, my life completely changed, and it has really turned me into the person that I am today. I was born in Monterrey, Mexico. I don't know if some of you know where Monterrey is. It's by Texas. My grandmother was actually born in Texas, fell in love with a Mexican, moved to Monterrey, and started a family there. When I was 7, my mom decided to come to Phoenix, Arizona, running away from domestic violence. She had tried to run away before, but not long enough and not far away enough. So she decided to take her kids to Phoenix, Arizona, and we went from living in Monterrey, Mexico, I had a house, I had my room, to living in a garage, 63rd Avenue in Earl, here in Phoenix. It was me, my mom, and my 2 sisters. I remember the confusion that I had as a young kid, not knowing where I was, where my mom was, who the people around me were, what language they were speaking. And I started to become very frustrated. One night I waited for my mom to come home to tell her how frustrated I was and how much I disliked where I was. When she came home through that garage, it was very late, it was dark, she walked in, and I couldn't tell her all that I wanted to tell her, mean things. I felt like I really hated her at that time for doing what she did to me. And I was going to tell her that, but I couldn't. She came to that garage door and I told her, Mom, I miss you. Because at 7 years old, that's really all that I wanted to say. How much I miss my mom. That night we had a long talk. She held me, I held her. We cried together. And then my life here began. With one sentence. Daniel, by the way, you're going to school tomorrow. That was it. For many of us, education is something that you have to go through. For many of us, education is something that you put on paper and you get a job and you move on. For many of us, education is that going from 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 7th, 8th, high school, and that's it. It's a process. For me, education is my life. When you don't have papers, when you don't have money, when people are out there telling your story for you and telling it badly, saying you're a criminal, saying you're a drug dealer, education is all you have to fight back. My education is what I use to fundamentally change my reality. Because the reality around me right now is that I'm not good enough. That I'm not American enough. That I shouldn't have the opportunity that peers that grew up with me have. Even though I sat next to them at school or at church or in the bus. But that's what my education is for me. And that's why I hold on to it so tightly and so strongly. Because when I was young, I was told, like many of you, that I can be anything that I wanted to be. That if you lived in this country, the country of opportunity, that anything can happen if you work hard enough. And for dreamers, for us Americans without papers, that's all we have done. And that's all I have done since I was 7. Work hard enough to restore an American dream that was told to me, an American dream where you can be who you want to be. That if you have an education, you can change things. And you can change the world around you. That if you have an education, it's not a matter of taking two sides, but finding the middle and finding the right solutions and reasonable solutions so that everybody can move forward together. So ever since I was 7, I did have a dream to be an attorney, and I continue on that dream. But I also know there's a lot of other dreams around me. Dreams of people that you know. Some of you are teachers, former pastors, are involved maybe in the community. There's a lot more students like myself that are out there and that have dreams. In 2001, the DREAM Act was introduced. Now I'm not going to assume you know what the DREAM Act is, so I will tell you. The DREAM Act is a piece of federal legislation that will grant a pathway to legalization to students that were brought here when they were young, grew up here, graduated from high school, have no criminal record, and go to college for 2 years or fight for this country in the military for 2 years. It was introduced in 2001 by Republican Senator Orrin Hatch and Democratic Senator Richard Durbin. It was a bipartisan bill supported by the Democrats and Republicans alike, but it didn't get too much attention until 2005. If you remember, in 2005 was a time when there was a lot of immigration marches, large-scale immigration marches. There was anti-immigration bills at the federal level. So when the rhetoric was starting to heat up, and when this talk about let's deport them all was starting to really pick up, we really tried to push for the DREAM Act as a way to protect students like myself and children that grew up here and committed no crime but that of growing up. So in 2007 was the first time the DREAM Act was put up for a vote. It failed in the Senate by about 8 votes. The morning of the vote, we had the support of Senator John McCain in Arizona. But one thing happened. At that time, President Bush was really trying to pass immigration reform. If you remember, immigration reform is something that he campaigned on, and he wanted that to be his legacy. He really wanted to find a compromise. But he wouldn't take parts of immigration reform. He wanted the whole thing. So the morning of the vote in 2007, he sent an email to all Republican senators saying, do not vote for this bill. We lost the support of Senator McCain, who at the time was also positioning himself to run for president. And we lost the support of a lot of other voters or votes that we had depended on. Ever since, this issue has been so politicized that finding real, reasonable solutions has been very hard. When President Obama won his presidency in 2008, he said, I will pass comprehensive immigration reform within the first 100 years. 100 days. Sometimes he feels like he said 100 years. And we're still waiting, right? 100 days. So we did wait it, and the 100 days passed, and nothing had happened. It was very hard after the healthcare battle, really, to have any bipartisanship in Congress. And we have seen our leaders in Congress unwilling or incapable or unable to really come together to solve tough issues. And not just in immigration, but also in healthcare or education, in jobs. Everything that matters to our communities has been impossible to deal with at the federal level. So what happened is that at the time, in 2010, we tried again to pass the DREAM Act. For the first time ever, it passed in the House with Republican support, bipartisan support. In the Senate, it fell short again, about 6 votes. After that, and until now, it has become nearly impossible to pass this bill at the federal level because of the way that our politics is working. So what began, and what President Obama started to deal with this issue in a way that didn't require Congress was through this concept of prosecutorial discretion. Now, when you commit a crime, maybe when you're young and you drink underage, or you get a fake ID, or you speed, or whatever you do, you go to court. Now, when you go to court and there's evidence there that you did this crime, do you automatically get, convicted then and there and sentenced? Or sometimes you will get offered a plea, right? You get offered a plea saying, okay, well, I know that you did this, but we're going to plea you to this other crime, which is a lesser offense, and then that way, you can go on with your life. A lot of that's called prosecutorial discretion. When prosecutors, the law enforcement systems, choose who to prosecute and how, based on maybe priorities or the ability or the availability of resources, right? So prosecutorial discretion started within the immigration system. It's always been there, but it was revamped about a year ago. And what the Department of Homeland Security started saying is, look, we can't pass immigration reform right now. We can't even pass the DREAM Act But it doesn't make sense to deport individuals like Daniel. It doesn't make sense to deport individuals like working families that have been here for years and years and that are waiting to have their papers, but the petition process takes 24 years because our immigration system is so outdated, right? So let's prioritize who we really want to deport, right? That started, and the hope was that individuals like myself wouldn't be deported. And that individuals that hadn't committed a crime wouldn't be deported. That would focus on people that should be deported, whoever they may be, right? But not the people that everyone agrees with, like dreamers, for example, should be given an opportunity. Well, a year after this was implemented, less than 5% of people actually benefited from this. It wasn't working like it was intended, because at the end, it was still up to the discretion of prosecutors. And a lot of prosecutors within the Department of Homeland Security have what is called an arrest and deport mentality. That's what you do. You arrest them, you deport them. It's a process. There is no time to think about who we should focus on. There's no resources to spend on this. Let's just arrest and deport. So the next step was, how do we create a category where we strengthen prosecutorial discretion? How do we create a category where if we give this qualifications or requirements, these people will not be deported? And on June 15th of that year, that happened. After 2 years of asking the president, we can't pass the DREAM Act, but we need your support and we need to protect his youth. We finally got some sort of relief. And it's huge. But let me tell you first about it. June 15th, 2012, President Obama directed the Department of Homeland Security to provide relief through the form of deferred action to students that meet certain requirements. And I'll tell you those requirements. You have to have arrived in the U.S. before the age of 16. You have to have been here continuously for 5 or more years. You have to have a clean record. You have to be in high school, graduated from high school, obtain your GED, be in college, or graduate from college. You have to have gone through the educational system somehow, at least in high school. And you cannot be above the age of 30. Now, does anybody know what these requirements sound like? Sounds like the DREAM Act. It's almost the exact requirement as the DREAM Act. So deferred action, what this is called, is a way to protect DREAM Act eligible students, like myself, from being deported until our Congress and we, the people, force our Congress to deal with this issue and find reasonable solutions to update our immigration system. It's the first win, the first celebration, the first relief that immigrant communities have received for more than 20 years. Because since 1986, under Reagan, the Reagan Amnesty Act, it has been nothing but enforcement type of legislation. So it's a huge deal for our communities. This is what would happen if you're eligible for deferred action. You would go to USCIS, Immigration Services, provide all the papers you have, all the documentation that you have about being here. This is where the irony comes from, that I'm undocumented, but I have more documentation about being in this country than a lot of people. Everything that I have that has my name and has to do with this country, I keep. Like a lot of my friends, because it's the only thing that we have. So that honor roll certificate that I received in the 5th grade for being good in math or something like that, I have still. That's only, hey, I'm here, I'm documented, right? So I present all these documents and I qualify. They would put me on a safe list. I'm not going to be deportable. Okay? They will grant me deferred action saying, look, we know this individual is here, but we're not going to deport him or her because they're just not a priority right now. It doesn't make sense. Not only that, I will be able to apply for a work permit if I show the need to have to work. Now I have to pay $42,000 a year for school, so I have no problem with that.
Yes.
But here's what matters. You know, sometimes it's opportunities, right? And for a lot of us, it's about fighting for that opportunity. It has never been about getting benefits or automatically be given stuff. What we're really fighting for is that opportunity to fight for ourselves, right? To do for ourselves. And it's not the 9-digit number a lot of the times. It's not the work permit. I've talked to some students that have broken down crying at the thought that they would have a state-issued ID. Because again, a lot of them, that ID is a driver's license or getting into an R-rated movie, right?
People take that for granted.
Or buying alcohol, whatever it is you need that ID for, it's a function. For us, an ID is not a function. It's our identity. To be told that for the first time ever, we're going to have an ID telling us that we belong in the state of Arizona. It's something that we have never, ever had. And when you're young, and when you grow up American, and you reach a point that you're told you're not American enough, anything that you get that reinforces your belief and restores your faith in that American dream, it is the world to you. So that's what this is about. It is not the DREAM Act. It is not immigration reform. But it's the first step that we have taken to integrate immigrant youth into our communities. To tell them you can have an ID and a driver's license. If you need to work, you can work. If you find a job. And if you live in another state besides from Arizona, then you can pay in-state tuition. In Arizona, it's a little different. So that's what happens here. And that's what deferred action meant, June 15th. We expect the application process to begin August 15th. Now let me tell you a little bit about what it means for people in Arizona. We expect that about 40 to 50,000 individuals will qualify for deferred action. Okay? 40 to 50,000 in the state of Arizona alone. When the application process hits, there's going to be a huge demand. There will be people waiting in line for this, right? And eventually, if they get everything, they will be able to get a job or look for a job at least, because it's bad for everyone out there, right? And they will go through this. But if you're a student, and the majority of us are students, if you're a student, even though you can work in Arizona, because we passed Proposition 300 in 2006, which made me ineligible for merit-based public scholarships and forced me to pay 3 times as much in tuition, that doesn't change. So we still have to pay out-of-state tuition. Okay? So a lot of students, their education, like myself, which is really what we wanted to focus on, it's still going to be just as hard. But we will be, our fear at least of being deported will be alleviated somewhat. And we will have that idea that we can finally drive or even walk sometimes without being scared that we're going to get pulled over or that a cop is going to approach us. And now under SB 1070, ask us for our papers, right? So it's definitely something good. So that's what we're preparing for. And I know that it was mentioned earlier, a lot of the work that I do is with DREAM Act Youth through the Arizona DREAM Act Coalition. And I'm also the president of the We Are America Coalition. Recently we launched a campaign called the No Dream Deferred campaign. When the announcement hit, June 15th, that same day, we got calls and heard of stories of notary services charging people $200 to sign a paper, a notarized paper, saying that they were here on that day. Why? Because you have to prove that you were here. But you don't need to pay $200 to do that. We got calls, and we've been receiving calls of attorneys saying, give me $2,000, and when this process starts, we'll start it for you. The process is not even there. How is anyone, including attorneys, going to know if someone is going to be eligible for this? Those stories are multiplied dozens and dozens of times. So what the We Are America Coalition has done is we have partnered with the American Immigration Lawyers Association and the Arizona State Bar to provide free legal assistance for people that are eligible for deferred action. Through this program, we have been given a lot of educational workshops on what this is. And the educational workshops are given anywhere that people need them. The majority of them have been at churches, because that's already a group that needs that information. So if you guys want one here, let me know. After we have the process, what it's going to look like, and we hope that it would work, if we're going to have attorneys be ready in locations to review applications, making sure that people are eligible. And once that attorney reviews the application, the individual can apply by himself or herself. We hope that this really decreases the fraud that has been going on in the community, especially the immigrant community that is so vulnerable to fraud. Because families are willing to pay $10,000 if they need to, if an attorney tells them that they have an opportunity. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that. So of course, we're prepared with educational campaigns to do that. Now, what's next? Now we have this program, we're going to educate people. Eventually, we're going to have 40,000 to 50,000 students benefit from this. What comes next in this movement for immigration reform? Because ultimately, that's the big enchilada, so to speak, right? We need immigration reform. We need to move forward with that. So how do we do it? Dreamers have been able to share their stories. And through the stories that we share, have been able to change people's hearts and minds. By coming out as undocumented. By losing the fear. Sometimes, even if it means putting your own future at risk. We have done so because we have seen the effects of where we are going if we don't stand up. The effects of people, our peers, committing suicide because they have lost all hope. The effects of SB 1070 in Arizona and the rise in depression rates that have gone off the roof. And you talk to somebody like James or any other educator that you know, they will tell you how depressed students are right now because they're not given an opportunity. The rise in homelessness because parents left voluntarily and involuntarily, leaving their kids behind. The separation of families. We have seen that, and that's why we took that risk to tell our own stories. But the next step in our movement is to say that my mom is a person as well. She's just as human as I am. And what we hope to do next in this long-term battle for immigration reform and human rights is to be able to empower our families and our communities so that my mom can also stand up and say, I'm not a criminal. I am a woman that had to make a decision. A mother that has worked hard. And I don't deserve to be treated this way. So that's where we're going. And I know that the help of churches is going to be very important. And I am very glad, as Jen has already mentioned, to have been part of a church that has supported DREAM Act students in immigration reform for years. Because when we didn't have a lot of places to turn into, we didn't have a lot of churches that were open to this issue and willing to talk about it, First Church did. So that is the legacy of this church. And the fact that I have stayed in this church as the leader in this movement just shows how much appreciation I have for a church that is able to tackle this issue and talk about it. And is able to talk about how do we find real solutions. Because again, when I was 7, I had a dream to be an attorney. And I had a dream that was an American dream. And when I read those textbooks, just like you, if I remember correctly, you said, give me you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses yearning to breathe free. It wasn't give me you're tired unless they're too tired to work in the fields. It wasn't give me you're poor unless they can't find a job within 90 days. Your huddled masses yearning to breathe free unless they have a pre-existing condition. It wasn't that. So that's what I do, and that's ultimately what the movement of dreamers is about. To restore the American dream that we believed in and that you believed in. And that should be restored to move this country and this state forward. So thank you so much for being here today. I know that was a brief overview.
If you have any questions, this is the time to ask him.
Does all this apply to all immigrants or just Mexicans?
Oh, now in Arizona, we're Mexican, right? The majority of us, because we're so close to the border. In a state like California, 1 in 10 immigrant youth is of 18%. In states like Florida, there's a lot of other Latinos, right? And in states like New York, there's a lot of Africans and Canadians, because yeah, there's some undocumented Canadians that would benefit from this, that grew up here and and did that. So it would apply to all immigrants.
So if someone watching the video has a question or something, can they email you?
Definitely.
What is your email address?
My email address is X Daniel Rodriguez with a Z, another X at Gmail. But if it's about specifically deferred action, I would encourage everyone to go to the website www.nodreamdeferred.org. Did you have a question?
Information to everybody.
I'm sorry. These were great meetings. I'm sure you all appreciate what Robert does for us. The church does not pay for this food as part of his ministry, but it comes out of his pocket. So we love these meetings. We want to support this. So if you can, put something in the basket, please do. So anyway.
And Robert, can we find something for donations to be put?
It's just out for people to donate.
Okay.
I do this because this is my ministry, and I use part of my tithe to pay for food stuff. I'm not begging for
Do we need to have a Dream Act donation basket?
If you would like to, but I also would just like to reiterate that if anybody wants to give a donation to Robert for the food. Okay, perfect. Thanks so much.
Daniel, I wanted to ask about this application process. August 15th, now there are no applications for anything in the state of Arizona that don't have a charge for it.
Right.
What is the charge?
That's one of the things right now that we are advocating internally with the Department of Homeland Security. The information that we've gotten from them is that overall this is going to take about $500 to $600
Per person.
per person.
I was curious about the scams that are in progress, and have they been reported to the AG's office? And is there any action on that we know of?
Yeah. So fraud is a huge problem, and the Arizona State Bar has acknowledged that. There was always a process to document fraud or to ask for this to be looked into. But when you call the Arizona State Bar, you press number 2 or something for fraud, and then they put you on this long message about what to do, how to do it, those kinds of
An
messages.
all-day event.
So it's documenting fraud and stopping fraud isn't as easy as it should be. However, the State Bar has recognized that this is a need and have recognized the amount of fraud that will happen because of deferred action. And so they are actually a partner in the No Dream Deferred campaign, and they are working on providing a mechanism for people to call or use the internet to provide information on fraud. So that's what we're working on right now.
I have personally had occasion to report a scam, or twice actually, and I've called my police department, the non-emergency number. They've taken my report and then they've reported it to the Attorney General's office, the State Attorney General's office, and then the Attorney General's office sends me the forms to fill out, which sounds like a good process too.
Yeah, and it's
I
definitely
don't see them cooperating with the dreamers.
No.
it's hard. Again,
not at all.
we live in an environment where people are scared to even call the police.
Yeah.
So for them to take the extra step of calling an agency to report fraud, it's hard. But we're trying to make it easier for them in a way that they don't feel threatened because of their own status. So that if they do this reporting online, they're not going to be asked what their name is. They're just going to be asked information about what happened, so that the State Bar can look into it.
Do you know of anybody who has something has happened that they have crossed the path of a law enforcement person since June 15th? And what happens at that point to a DREAM Act student?
So when prosecutorial discretion, the more general policy, began, we did have a lot of DREAM Act youth that were let go. So they weren't being processed. That was somewhat of a win, an achievement for us, that deportations of DREAM Act students went down. Since June 15th, what we have heard is that process is just faster. So at least locally, ICE and the Department of Homeland Security has been, for the most part, pretty good at letting students go that would benefit from this program.
What does that mean to let them go?
As I said before, if you got stopped for any reason or approached the police by any reason and you had to be processed with your fingerprints and everything, you were transferred to ICE. And an ICE hold was placed on you. From then, you would have been incarcerated at one like the sheriff's, 10th City or 4th Avenue Jail or one of these locations and waiting in immigration court to be there, which can take months. Now, how it's supposed to work and how it has worked in some cases is that if a student is arrested and goes to the police is supposed to call ICE, and ICE, if there is no criminal record, because the police can check that, ICE will tell them to let them go. And there have been a few occasions where that has happened. We don't know how often it's not happening, but of course we always work on making sure that it is happening and putting more pressure on ICE to do that.
I have students that are many students actually who need to know about this now. When will you start having these kind of functions and forums for the kids so that they would know what they can do?
We've started to do the educational workshops about a month ago. And on the NotreDameDefer.org website, you can find out when those forums are happening. And if you want to host one, send the information. First Church wants to host one. We provide everything. You just invite people. On August 20th is when we will start the application workshops, where students can come in with their documents, and if they're ready, do the application then and there, have attorneys review it, and continue the process. For those that are not ready, they will come into one of these application workshops, be given a worksheet saying you're missing this, this, and this, and this, come back at the next one, and then they can come back and apply whenever they are ready. So we're doing them now for just general education. For the application ones, about August 20th.
So there is the paperwork out there for the kids to fill out already?
No, what there is, and it's also on the website, is, for example, one of the requirements is you have to have arrived before the age of 16. This is what I was talking about earlier, honor roll certificates, school records, right, like grades, things like that, getting all that together. That's what we're telling students to do right now. Get everything together. Call the school, make sure you have the diploma, make sure you have the honor roll certificates if you have them, make sure you have anything else that says you were here before the age of 16. And that 5 years after that, continuously, you were still here. Bank statements, medical records, school records, immunization records, all of that, get them together now so that you're ready. Because whenever you start a process like this, a new administrative procedure, so to speak, it takes a long time for bureaucracy to catch up to that. You guys know that, right? It takes a long time for a government agency to actually work how it's supposed to. So when this process begins, that by no means that they will be ready for it. So we expect that USCIS is going to have a lot of need, and also there's going to be some sort of waiting line until they hire more people to deal with this request.
Okay, so you're here before you're 15, you have to stay 5 years. If you leave the United States to go back to Mexico to visit family, does that complicate your situation, or do you have to stay right here?
You have to have arrived before the age of 16 and have shown 5 years of continuous presence. The only way to, let's say you meet everything, but 3 years ago you had to leave for some reason, then you came back. The only way to combat that is to show that the reason you left was a humanitarian reason. Maybe you had to visit your grandma who was dying. We have a lot of that. Relatives dying, they don't want to miss the funeral. Things like that. If you just left because you wanted to go to Rocky Point, that's going to be a little trickier.
Okay, so it's still going to be up to a judge's or someone's discretion to interpret.
Yes. And again, this is within the framework of prosecutorial discretion. So even though there's even more clear guidelines on how to implement it, ultimately there's going to be room for you to benefit from this, even if you have maybe a little bit of a spot in your record. But at the same time, there's also going to be the possibility that if you did apply for this and you benefit, that you're just going to get a bad judge or something like that. So it's just about continuing.
What we'll do is ask people to stay after it. Will you be able to answer people's questions?
Definitely.
Afterward? Okay, because people have other engagements.
Yeah.
So they have to. Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
Thank you.